how do you feel about Squid Games and how did you actually watch the show? Did you do sub, dubbed, or Korean with no subtitles?
Korean with no subtitles, you're a wild boy if you're just watching it in a language you don't understand with no subtitles. That's a level of like anime commitment, and even though it's not an anime, you know what I mean? Like where people just like people watch animes with no subtitles just to be like, I'm really in anime. Like that's not me. But at the same time,
let me put you on game.
Yeah. And we're gonna move on to our last topic. This subject has been sweeping the nation and has been breaking records for streaming on streaming platforms. Today, we're about to talk about Squid Games, Netflix's breakout show that has just had everybody on its coattails, wondering what happens next, figuring out who everybody is and why, and leaving us with all these burning questions. So to start off, how do you feel about Squid Games and how did you actually watch the show? Did you do sub, dubbed, or Korean with no subtitles?
Korean with no subtitles, you're a wild boy if you're just watching it in a language you don't understand with no subtitles. That's a level of like anime commitment, and even though it's not an anime, you know what I mean? Like where people just like people watch animes with no subtitles just to be like, I'm really in anime. Like that's not me. But at the same time, I couldn't watch it dubbed because I can watch animation dubbed, but watching live action dubbed, it's just way too off for me. Like it doesn't, like the emotions don't translate, like the lack of mouth movement to language synchronicity like doesn't really vibe. So yeah, I had to watch it sub.
Yeah,
But my overall impressions of the show, I was glued to my seat. Like I really had to see what happened next. I really enjoyed it a great deal. I think so many of the games definitely kept me super engaged with the show and had me wondering like how they were going to get out of this situation, even though you knew they were, like, or at least the main characters were, but like you had to figure out how they were going to do it. But it also gave me a lot to think about afterwards in terms of the conversations that it sparks when you talk about class and race in some aspects and capitalism and the Korean economy. So it gave me a lot of things to stew on while also exciting me, which is what you want from a television show. So I really enjoyed it.
yeah,
What about you,
yeah,
bro?
yeah. For me, you had to listen to it in the subtitle version. Because the dub version, one of the things that I heard about that was a lot of translations didn't come across very well when they try to translate it directly to English, as opposed to just having English subtitles where you can have a little bit more manipulation as to what of getting the essence of what someone said as opposed to acting it out verbally. Um, and yeah, as an overall series, it was really insightful. It was really insightful to the nature of contemporary Korean culture and just the perspective of an average Korean citizen, which the show really did a good job of just highlighting. These were average, run-of-the-mill people, albeit all having outstanding debt problems. And I feel like it really took the best elements of other media like Hunger Games, The Purge, and even Saw, and just showed characters as they formed, broke alliances, and really went against their best judgment in a lot of the show in order to just get a chance to get out of the place in life that they currently were in. And I just really commend the writer and the director of the show. He went through a lot. Apparently, they did it on a pretty low budget. I think maybe 50 million or something like that, which by today's standards is kind of low for a show of this kind of scale. And apparently, he lost 4 teeth while directing it through the production process because he was so stressed.
Wow.
Yeah, like he went through it. Apparently, it took him like 6 months just to get through the first 2 episodes in terms of just writing and hammering it out. And so you can see the quality just stitched into the whole show, and that was really refreshing to see. And just moving into what were some of your favorite characters? Spoiler free favorite characters of the show.
Um, I'll say Ali,
Mhm.
and I'll go Oh Il Nam, the old guy.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, it was Sabyuk as well as Il-nam and Sang-woo. I think Se-byuk, she had a really breakout performance and just a lot of intricacies of her character. This is a very, very, very small spoiler. The fact that, and I think a lot of people wouldn't even have caught this, that she kind of spoke with a South Korean accent and tried to put on a front whenever she was in South Korea. But when she was talking to another character in the show, she switched to her North Korean accent, which was her native accent, or supposed to be her native accent. I didn't realize that South Koreans and North Koreans have slightly different accents, even though they both speak Korean. And that was really fascinating to watch, just like little intricacies that were just very well woven into the story. And I just love that it's a culture that I don't understand, but through all the breakdowns and all the YouTube videos of everybody trying to like put in their 2 cents, you get to see so much more of the story. As well as Il-nam, he had a very interesting perspective on the story, as well. And then finally Sang-woo, another fascinating character with a great story arc that really surprised me in a lot of ways and provided such a rich experience for the overall show. But yeah, now we're going to move into the spoiler discussion. So we're about to really get into the weeds, and this is the part that I've been waiting for this whole time. Let's get into it, bro. So first of all, just some interesting observations. 45 billion won is equivalent to 38 million US dollars, for those that didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know if they did it in the dub version, if they did it with just the dollar amount. But yeah, I had to I was doing my calculations in like the middle of the show trying to figure out like how much money this was, because I just wanted to contextualize it. But yeah, let's get into it. There were a lot of deaths on the show for sure, of a lot of really important characters. So yeah, definitely spoiler warning. Who would you say, whose death hit you the most?
I think it's the common death. He was a people's champ, Ali Abdul, man. Like,
yeah, same. I don't know if there's too many other answers, honestly.
Yeah, he got, you know, like he, yeah, you know, a Pakistani refugee or, you know, immigrant. Not quite sure what his status was, but you know that he was going through it with him and his family. And so just to see that he got betrayed, but not really betrayed, because it was a game of survival at the end of the day. But you know, he definitely got
betrayed, man. He got betrayed.
I mean, how you either take the L and you die, or you betray, you know, your mans to survive. When it's kind of a binary option like that, it's hard to say. I get it, but it was a betrayal. But at the end of the day, a lot of people would have done the same thing if they had to survive. You know what I mean?
I get it. It's just, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to watch because he is a good representation of what kindness in this world can do to you, in that he was so pure and he was so kind to everyone around him, even in the circumstance he was placed in, where he was vulnerable to being deceived like that. Yeah. And it's really unfortunate, and definitely pulled on our heartstrings, because up until the last moment, like, he thought that he was going to find a way out with Sang-woo, like they were going to do it together and they were going to get out together. But you know, that's why I say betray, because I get it, but it's like, you know, he just trusted Sang-woo so much, so it seemed to me like just the worst kind of betrayal. But yeah, Ali was definitely the toughest death for me. I felt so bad for dude, man. Like,
yeah, 100%. And did you notice how each character kind of suffered based on their sins that they committed in the past? So like,
I didn't.
So like Se-byuk, the girl, she threatened to slice the Korean smuggler's throat, and so her throat actually ends up getting cut in the last episode, right? Then you got Ali Abdul. He stole from his employer, even though his employer wasn't paying him. He still ended up stealing from him, and Ali Abdul got shysted, and his marbles were essentially stolen from him too. Then you got Ji-hun, him swearing on his mother's life, and then her happening to die later in the story. And then finally, Sang-woo, he was about to commit suicide right before they actually decided to redo the games, and he entered himself. And then, you know, as the series closed, he ended up kind of rectifying his sins and took his own life. So it was really interesting to see how a lot of characters just had their comeuppance in ways that were foreshadowed.
Right. Yeah, it was a very I really appreciate that parallel though, because there's so much to dive into with the show. It's so many little different layers and nuggets. So it's a really interesting development to think about it that way. I'm glad you caught that.
Yeah. What characters arcs did you kind of enjoy the most?
I echo your sentiments on Sung Woo. Like I think he starts out the series as a relatively likable character. I mean, as likable as the characters on on the show can be, because they all have like severe flaws for the most part, other than maybe Ali. So
Yeah.
he starts out as a character somewhat likable, but he becomes one of the more realistic characters in terms of what he's willing to do to survive. And you see him continuously betray, steal, lie his way to the top. And he becomes more and more brutal and callous as the games go on. And I think he's probably a good representation of what like poverty does to certain people. Like where you start out one way in life and your circumstances and hunger or poverty or debt turn you into an entirely different person. And I think you see that over the course of the series. So him going from the opposite of the typical, like, you know, anti-hero to true hero or villain to hero arc, like he goes the opposite way. So I thought that was really intriguing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, man. The idea of how circumstances determine your behavior and your behavioral patterns, and how the show really just exemplifies the crab in the bucket mentality, that if you choose to change the way you do things and be more cooperative, you can have a certain amount of success. But if you fight and you decide to just do infighting and just say, hey, I'm going to do whatever I need to do by any means at any cost, you end up really just hurting yourselves in ways that aren't necessary. And I really liked his arc as well, man. The whole anti-hero antagonist that finally redeems himself at the end story was really dope. Just the way his character represented just the elite status and then the fall from grace of that status, and him just trying to find himself and pick himself up, but just really not being able to, and losing himself and what he represents, what the goodness in his heart throughout this series was just really fascinating to watch. And then you juxtapose that to Ji-hun, who the main character of the show, who seemed pretty selfish and thoughtless of others, and developed that more and more as the series went on, and as he got through a bunch of lucky circumstances, getting himself somehow stumbling his way to the end and the finish line. But in the midst of all that, and him understanding what's actually important in life, he still loses it all. He gets it all and still loses it all. All the connections, all the friends that he made, it just didn't matter at the end of the day. And then finally, that last story arc that I think was really the most important, the final reveal. How did you feel about Il-nam's reveal as being the originator of these games?
I didn't call it exactly, but I suspected him from the beginning. Like I didn't know that was going to happen. Like I didn't know he was going to be the man behind, like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. Like I didn't know he was going to be that, but like I knew something was off about him. Like because when they were playing Red Light Green Light, like he was the only one that seemed like he was having the time of his life, while people around him were just being gunned down mercilessly. And the show like wanted you to believe that was because of dementia, but just his behavior during the series, I was like, yo, like something about this dude, like something is off. And then like when you get to the game, the marble game, and it gets to the end and you see like they kind of try to make you feel a little bit bad for him when he's getting his marbles taken and he's getting deceived. But then like when he has that moment of like lucidity and you realize like, nah, he's completely aware of like everything. He was just letting it happen. So then that made me think back to because they had me, I was like, oh, maybe he really does have dementia. And that's why he was smiling. And I thought back to the first game and I was like, nah, like dude knows something. Like he's aware of something. And then the scene where he had the rabbit mask and you see someone pick the rabbit mask up and put it on, I recognize his hands. So I was like, that's kind of where I put it together. Like I didn't know he was the ringleader of the whole thing, but I was like, nah, he's a part of it in that way. And then when the reveal happened, I wasn't super shocked, but that's just me. Like I'm not trying to be the smart guy that's like, I saw it coming the whole time, because there were a lot of things in the show that really, knocked my socks off. But that one thing, I was like, yeah, like something ain't right.
Yeah, man. That knocked my socks off. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. I wanted answers. I was like, what is going on here? But what a way to just kind of like land the bird, because this is the kind of writing that is awe-inspiring and gives you pause to think about what it is that you're observing, as opposed to the way that Game of Thrones ended. Just kind of a letdown of all letdowns.
Let's not do it. Let's not. I can't. I haven't recovered.
Yeah, let's not go down that path. But yes, this show, I feel like, really exemplified social commentary and just really demonstrated that it doesn't matter what language a story is in. If it's a good story and if it connects with people and you get at the core elements of human nature, people will vibe with it.
I got a quick question before we close, though.
Yeah.
Off the beaten path a little bit, but what was your favorite game?
That's a great question. I think my favorite game was definitely, I think Tug of War.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah,
I mean, they're all good, but yeah, that's a good one.
That was a cool one, because especially when you see how Il-Nam, from observing all those years, he knew what the best strategy was in order to actually beat the other team.
Yeah.
And so he used that, saying, oh yeah, we used to play this all the time as kids. So, when it's actually, yeah, I watched people, kill each other for 30 years. So I picked up on what strategy works the best.
Yeah.
And, it was getting real for him, because he was really playing the game. Like, I don't know if any of his servants would have saved him if he got pushed off the string. Maybe they would have thrown a net up for him at the last minute or something. How about you?
It was definitely the glass game. Yeah, it was definitely the glass game, because I think, like a lot of people, I was going through the games and you're putting yourself in the situation. Like, would you be able to survive? And I feel with a lot of the games, like, it would have been very difficult, but I could find in my brain like a 10% or a 5% chance that maybe I could survive, because everyone thinks that the red light, green light is easy, but like, you have to think about like how crazy your nervous system is going during that game, especially just not expecting it and watching people around you die, and to have to be completely still while you're probably like, peeing down your pants leg is a lot. And then there's, of course, the other games, but the glass game was the first game where I was like, it is entirely dependent on where you're positioned as far as if you survive. Because if you're first, there is no way that you're making it through. If you're in the first 5, there's no way that you're making it through the glass game. And I'm sitting there debating like, like when they're thinking about what number to pick, I'm like, all right, I'm picking 1, because like they don't want you to pick 1. So I'm definitely picking 1, because no one else is going to want it. So if I pick it, there's a high chance that I'll have the easiest and like, the least trouble with the game. And then sure enough, if I would have been dead, like it just would have been over. But yeah, that was definitely my favorite game, was the glass game. But outside of the games and outside of the characters, there is a larger conversation surrounding the class dynamics and the debt culture in Korea and the United States. So I wanted to get into that. And I'll just say, like, I think that for me, watching the show, it initially seemed ridiculous that they would return after the brutality of the red light, green light game. But it's not so ridiculous when you consider the value that we place on money in our society. I think that if you observe the lengths that people go to in the pursuit of financial gain in real life, it's not that far off from what happens in the show. It's dramatized and it's placed in this game show format, but it's something that we often go through in day-to-day life in the pursuit of what we think is happiness through finances. Because like, how many times a week do you hear someone create this imaginary scenario like of this ridiculous or depraved situation or hypothetical for money, and you have to debate like whether or not you would do it. Like, you know, like how many fingers would you chop off for this amount of money? You know, like how much money would we have to give you to try crack? Like, it's like it's a completely normal conversation that people have on a day-to-day basis, just talking about what lengths would you go to for this just finite amount of money. And you know, it really kind of, the show, watching it, like it made me realize between this and Black Mirror, like I'll never see game shows the same again, because like it puts you in this position where you're realizing that the game shows that we have, whether you're talking about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, The Price is Right, like Jeopardy, all of these games, like they're just us all trying to escape our mediocre financial situations with these long shot games for other people's entertainment. And that's what game shows are. That's what Squid Game is. That's what that Black Mirror, the Merits episode was. It's all of us just trying to escape our day-to-day realities and our day-to-day existence that we have with our regular jobs, trying to attain the dream through, you know, putting ourselves through these trials or tests of our intellect, or like just debasing ourselves in some situations for money, you know, like Jerry Springer. Like people get paid to do that, and it seems crazy and it seems ridiculous, but it's just what we want to have, or what we have to do, or what people think they have to do in order to gain money, you know. And
it's perfectly describing the debt culture that is the underbelly of Korean as well as US, South Korean, and the United States culture. According to this Korean Herald article from 2020, South Korea poverty rates sat at 17.4%, while the US was 17.8%, the highest in the developed world. And by comparison, the UK was about 11.7%, and on the lower end, Finland at 6.5%, you know, a country that has a high welfare state and takes care of, you know, the bottom rung of their citizens to a large degree. And so debt has really become a societal norm that is really invasive in people's everyday lives. So you can see how those games like Jeopardy, how Squid Games just gives people a feeling of hope to get out of the place that they're currently in, because it feels so destitute. It feels so inescapable. You have people's social security checks being garnished for their student loan debt. You know, people age 65 and older, 67, who are in retirement, and their loans are just going with them to the grave. And it's really a part of this class divide that is so pernicious between the haves and the haves not in our societies, where a lot of the control of society is placed at the top, and people don't have so much say into the rules that end up governing their lives. You know, like the fact that student loans you cannot declare bankruptcy from student loans virtually means that it's with you for the rest of your life. So, you know, buckle in, buddy. And when I discussed this show with some friends of mine who are Korean, they're like, oh yeah, no, this is how it is for a lot of people. If you're on the bottom side of society, it is almost impossible to move up. You try to start your own business, you take out a small business loan, you fail like Jihan failed. And now you are stuck just like everybody else. You try to open, you know, like a chicken spot, and it just didn't do well. And then, you know, a couple gambling debts to just try to find some way to springboard yourself back into a place of contention in society where appearance is everything. And you looking as if you have high status is really important. And that's just not the reality for a lot of people. And the basic needs are met in a lot of ways, but you do become a slave to the system, because you can't escape the day-to-day struggle that you get shackled with, that seems okay because everybody's doing it.
I think we find ourselves judging these characters for their behavior and their shortcomings, but like in a lot of ways they are us, you know, especially when you understand how dire the debt situation in Korea is. Like it makes it so much harder. Like their system, it seems like, is so much less forgiving than ours, and ours is not forgiving at all. So you can only imagine how bad it is for them. And debt is something that it seems like it's like this force that takes control of people and ruins their lives, to the point where I was reading that they have the highest suicide rate amongst developed nations. So if you think about like suicide and the willingness to end your life or to give your life up, because life is so bad, like it really hits home when you see the characters come back to the game and say, what else do I have to live for? And then you tie that to the reality actually in Korea with how much people are taking their lives. And it's like what do they have to live for? It makes their decision to come back. So like it makes it make so much more sense, you know? So like we, you know, from a place of privilege might look at it like why would you go back after you saw all of that? And then you read into like what the situation is like. It's like, well, yeah, I might go back too, you know.
Yeah.
And you look at you know, the main character, and you look at how much of a, you know, a quote unquote failure he is in his life, and how he's gambling, and how he just seems like he's a degenerate. But like again, when you look at, like you talked about with it's almost like escapism in a sense, you know. So he's trying to escape the situation that almost seems like there is no escape. So, you know, it makes sense, his decisions, when you think about like what he's dealing with and what he's going through. So it's so easy to judge him on the surface, but it's a lot to deal with. But yeah, great show, awesome show, really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to see what they do with season 2, but I really, it was a really great watch.
Yeah, likewise. I would definitely recommend this to anybody. If I'm sure everyone has seen it based on the numbers, but for those who haven't, catch up, take your time, avoid as many spoilers as you possibly can. And yeah, just take it in. Please take it in.
Yeah, we haven't done a TV show in a while, but it was necessary to discuss this because it brings up a lot of interesting conversations.